Greetings, fellow lords and ladies. Well, our look at Game of Thrones Season 4 now continues on with the penultimate episode of the season, The Watchers on the Wall. So anyway, at the wall, Jon and Sam are standing watch atop the wall, staring out into the darkness of the north and awaiting the imminent wildling invasion. Sam attempts to interrogate Jon about what it was like to be with a woman, seeing as her deaths are looming and maybe his last chance to find out. Sam brings up that the vows of the Night's Watch only explicitly forbid members from taking wives or producing children, and that other activities are open to interpretation. Jon replies calmly that Alliser Thorne most likely does not care about their interpretations. When further pressed by Sam to describe lying down with Ygritte, Jon attempts to explain but is unable to properly express it, claiming exasperatedly that he's not a bleeding poet. Jon offers to take the watch up alone so Sam can go below. As Sam steps into a wooden lift and begins to descend the wall, an owl lands on top of the wall and begins hooting loudly. The owl is revealed to be controlled by a thin warg who is a member of the platoon of wildlings under command of Tormund and Styr, who have set up camp just outside the northern entrance to Castle Black. Tormund boasts about where he supposedly had sex with, prompting Ygritte to cut him short and cast her doubts on the validity of his claim. She tells him that she only cares about getting as many arrows through the hearts of crows as possible. She angrily talks about how the people south of the wall have used it to shut the wildlings out and hunt them as enemies. She says that now the wildlings are the hunters and the southerners their prey. Sir Moggy replies that Ygritte has more words about killing than she has arrows. She defends herself by saying she killed just as many people on Molestown as he. Styr replies that none of them was her former lover. He further marks by saying that when she sees him, she'll could just give him a slice of ginger minge, causing her to jump to her feet in anger. Ygritte stares Styr down, claiming that she wants to kill Jon Snow herself. The looks around the camp and warns the others that she has an arrow ready for anyone who attempts to kill him. Just outside the camp, a shaded person cradling something passes by the wildlings unnoticed. Meanwhile, Sam is caught reading a book about wildlings by Maester Aemon. Aemon correctly guesses that Sam is reading the book because he wants to know what kind of fate might have befallen Gilly if she fell into wildling hands during the sack of Molestown. He also surmises that Sam has shown a keen interest in her fate because he is in love with her, despite Sam's protest to the contrary. Aemon muses about the girl he once loved, saying that he could still picture her as clear as day and that she is more real than Sam is. After being dismissed by Aemon, Sam leaves the Maester's chambers only to hear Gilly at the gate begging to be allowed inside, revealing her survival of the Molestown massacre and her identity as a cloaked figure approaching Castle Black. Piper attempts to deny her passage into the castle, saying he is not allowed to open the gate under any circumstances. However, Sam orders Pip to allow her in, causing Pip to relent and let her in. Sam promises Gilly wherever she goes, he will go. Sam promises Gilly wherever she goes next, he will go too. But their reunion is cut short by 2 blows from the horn, indicating the man's wildling army has finally begun their assault. Sam rushes to get Gilly safely inside the castle while other brothers of Night's Watch prepare for the impending attack by wildlings. On top of the wall, Jon hears the horn blowing and looks north, witnessing a tremendous conflagration to the north, just as Mance had promised. South of the wall, the then warg's owl also spots the fire and informs Styr and Tormund that the time has come to attack Castle Black. Jon approaches Alliser Thorne, a violence and admits that they should have heeded Jon's advice to block the gates. He grimly muses that leadership often means being second-guessed by every clever little twat with a mouth, and when a man in charge second-guesses himself, all is doomed. Steeling himself for the impending siege, Thorne begins barking orders to the archers, prepare them to fire upon the attackers amassing below. Sam brings Gilly and her baby to a storage room where she can hide. Gilly wants Sam to stay with her as he promised, but he cannot as he swore to defend the wall as a brother of the Night's Watch. Before he leaves her, Gilly begs Sam to promise her that he won't die, and the two finally share a kiss. As Sam and Piper are preparing arrows at the southern gate, Piper laments that he's never seen a real battle before, or ever even held an edged blade. Pip asks how Sam is not afraid, but Sam replies that he is, as there are thousands of wildlings about to overrun them. Pip asks how he managed to kill a White Walker while being afraid. And Sam says at that moment, he just had to do something or Gilly would have been killed and her baby would have been taken. Sam further explains that at that moment, he wasn't himself. He was nothing, and when you are nothing, there is nothing to be afraid of. However, he explains the reason he is afraid now is because I'm not nothing anymore. Meanwhile, Ygritte spies on the castle to scout a number of defenders. She tells the other wildlings that most of the guards are at the top of the wall, and that few are left in the castle. The group immediately takes off towards Castle Black's southern gate, while Ygritte seems to have second thoughts. North of the wall, the massive wailing army emerges from the woods, the numbers include giants riding atop mammoths. Alistair orders the archers in the wall to knock their arrows, but they draw instead while Gran accidentally drops a barrel down the wall. Alistair drills his men and properly following orders when another horn blows from down below at Castle Black, signaling the unanticipated appearance of Tormund's band of wildlings at the castle's southern entrance. Realizing the dire need for experienced men to defend the keep from the surprise attack, Alistair orders General Slint to assume command of the wall's defenses and heads below to join the melee. Below, Tormund steers forces charge the gate while Ygritte, acting as a sniper, manages to pick off several men defending the gate with her bow. Pip is firing a crossbow, Sam assists by reloading on their crossbow, but Pip's burden is due to inexperience and nerves, so he repeatedly misses his shots. The band of wildlings manage to reach Castle Black's walls and begin scaling them using grappling hooks and ropes, forcing Sam and Pip to retreat. Alistair Thorne arrives with reinforcements from top of the wall via the wooden lift system, which is being operated by Ollie. Alistair gives an impassioned speech, promising that the Ancient Order of the Night's Watch and Castle Black will survive this battle. The speech rouses the Black Brothers, and Alistair personally leads the charge against the wildlings who have breached Castle Black's defenses, causing an intense battle to erupt in the courtyard. On the northern side of the wall, a wildling strike force led by two giants, one of which is riding a mammoth, charged towards Castle Black's outer gate. On top of the wall, General Slint, having no true leadership experience, breaks down the side of the massive wildling army against fumbling his orders. Gran steps in by falsely claiming that Alistair needs Janos back down below. Janos believes the lion leaves, allowing Jon to take command of the wall's defenses. The Black Brothers continue to rain down arrows on the advancing wildlings, even killing ones that are attempting to scale the wall. Dongo, armed with a massive bow, manages to fire a huge arrow at one of the bunkers atop the wall, completely obliterating it and killing the Black Brother manning it. The force that joins the arrow carries the Black Brother off the wall onto the other side, where he's shoved into ground with a tremendous amount of force. Down in Castle Black, the battle rages on between the wildlings and the Night's Watch. Styr and Ygritte continue to slay numerous Black Brothers. At one point, a group of wildlings breach Castle Black's dining hall. One wildling is killed when a Black Brother throws boiling stew in his face and beats him to death with a pot. Hob, Castle Black's cook, calmly enters the dining hall and kills a wildling with his massive butcher's knife. Meanwhile, Janos Slint casually retreats to a storage room where he discovers Gilly and her baby. Pip manages to kill a wildling with his crossbow, but is then shot through the neck by Ygritte. Sam covers Pip and stays with him until he dies. Sam is forced to leave Pip's body as he heads to Castle Black's lift system, but he is spotted by the thin warg. The warg charges at Sam as he desperately attempts to load his crossbow, managing to do so firing a bolt into the warg's head just before he reaches him. Meanwhile, Alistair Thorne is locked in a vicious duel with Tormund on the catwalks of Castle Black. Both seem evenly matched in skill. However, Thorne suffers a grievous wound and is forced to retreat, being dragged to safety as he continues to shout orders to his men. The Black Brothers defending the wall manage to repel most of the wildlings attacking the outer gate, but one giant manages to make it through, greatly weakening the gate by repeatedly smashing with his fists and managing to single-handedly begin lifting the gate. Jon, knowing the inner gate won't hold against the massive giant, sends a group of Black Brothers led by Gran to hold it at any cost. Arriving at the inner gate, Jon and Hill cowers when faced by the giant charging at them, but Gran bolsters his and the others' courage by reciting the Night's Watch oath. The Black Brothers ready their weapons just as the giant slams himself into the inner gate. Sam arrives atop the wall to ask Jon for more men defending the castle, and Jon attacks Sam with the releasing ghost from his pen to assist in the fighting. Jon descends the wall and finally enters the fray, quickly dispatching several wildlings to catching the attention of Styr. The two men meet in a single The two meet in a single combat. Steer eventually gets the upper hand by knocking Longclaw away and brutally assaulting John, smashing his face to an anvil and tossing him to the blacksmith's forge. Steer picks John up and begins strangling him, but John spits blood in Steer's face and strikes him long enough for John to grab the blacksmith's hammer lying next to him and buries in Steer's skull. Upon killing Steer, John is surrounded by Ygritte pointing her bow at him with an arrow drawn. He smiles at her, causing Ygritte to hesitate. Before either can say anything, Ygritte is shot near the heart by an arrow fired from Ollie, avenging the death of his father Ygritte's hands during the Welling attack on his village. John holds her in his arms, and she tells him that they should never have left the cave, and they lament circumstances that prevented them from being together as she succumbs to her wound. Aww. Atop the wall, Edison Tollett, who left John in command of the defenses, orders men to drop the scythe. A huge section of ice suddenly falls away from the wall, revealing a massive anchor-like blade attached to a chain that swings along the wall. Mowing through the wildlings and attempting to climb its face. Edison knows as the wildling forces are beginning to withdraw into the haunted forest, proclaiming that they have stopped them for now, but the wildlings still outnumbered the Black Brothers 1,000 to 1, and the Mance was simply testing their defenses. Below, a heavily wounded Tormund is surrounded into the courtyard, but continues to fight despite being the only wildling alive in Castle Black. He is finally subdued by John with a crossbow taken prisoner by the Night's Watch for interrogation. Sam returns to Gilly just like he promised and discovers Janos Slynt, who had appeared during the entire battle. Against all odds, the Night's Watch have repelled Mance Rayder's forces for the time being. The following morning, what is left of Castle Black's garrison begin to regroup and prepare for the inevitable next attack by Mance Rayder. John discusses with Sam that he has a suicidal solution to end the wildling threat. He plans to assassinate Mance Rayder, knowing he's the only thing binding the disparate wildling clans that make up the army, and his death will rob them of that purpose and leadership. Sam tries to talk sense into John, but to no avail. As John prepares to leave via Castle Black's tunnel, they discover the bodies of the Black Brothers who held the inner gate against the giant. Grant is among the casualties, and John tells Sam that all of the bodies must be burned. Before he leaves, he remembers the promise he made to Jorah Mormont and decides to leave Longclaw with Sam. Sam tells John to come back, and John looks at Sam and smiles dolefully before stepping out to the wilderness on the other side of the gate. Dun dun dun. So now let's take a look at some notes surrounding this episode. The title is a reference to the words of the oath sworn by new recruits into the Night's Watch, which include the lines, "I am the sword in the darkness, I am the watcher on the walls, I am the shield that guards the realms of men." The soundtrack playing for the credits is a rendition of the Night's Watch theme. In the official soundtrack release, it is titled Watchers on the Wall. Much like Blackwater, which focused essentially on King's Landing during the Battle of the Blackwater, this episode focuses entirely on events in or around Castle Black during the wildling assault, and no other storylines appear. This makes it only the third episode in the entire series that doesn't contain a single scene in King's Landing. As a result, King's Landing, Moat Cailin, Winterfell, Braavos, and Meereen do not appear in this episode, despite being featured in the opening sequence. The episode is directed by Neil Marshall, who previously directed the critically acclaimed Season 2 episode Blackwater. In an interview with BuzzFeed, Marshall made several comments about the episode. From start to finish, Marshall had 9 weeks to complete the episode, with 4 weeks devoted solely to pre-production. Marshall said, quote, "I definitely needed it this time," end quote. The additional weeks were devoted to planning out the battle, conceptualizing CGI mammoths, and choreographing a 360-degree crane shot of Castle Black during the battle. There was a 3-week shoot for the episode, of which 2 weeks were for the battle scenes. The mammoths were introduced for the first time in this episode, and Marshall said he wanted to get the mammoths to look just right. Quote, "The mammoth, we just wanted to look as huge and authentic as possible. I know that the creators of the show wouldn't allow anything less than 100% convincing mammoth. I'm very grateful for having such visual VFX supervisors around to make sure it was going to work, and it so did. Given that these scenes involved multiple elements, the live-action plates, the giants, and the mammoth itself went over the CGI, making sure when we add these elements together they line up correctly. These are easily the most complex scenes I've ever shot," end quote. Marshall explained that a huge green screen stood in front of the mammoth on set, and that it was moved by 4 guys in green lycra suits at each of its legs, to ensure that none of the actors crossed its path. Marshall shot the rehearsal scenes with the men in green suits as reference, and shot the same exact action without the green frame, just the empty space, which CGI Mammoth would be composited into. 360-degree shot of the battle in the castle took about 2 hours to block and rehearse. It took 7 takes to get it done perfectly. Marshall decided to do the 360-degree shot because Castle Black is a fully realized set, which made it perfectly suited for such a shot. Marshall said, quote, "As soon as I saw the set for the first time, I knew I wanted to pull off a 360 shot. The set and action were just screaming for it. So I devised a shot that would visually link all the major characters and clearly establish where they were at this particular point in the battle. I think geography is vitally important in an action sequence. It's all too easy to lose a sense of where characters are in the blaze of quick cuts and physical action. Having a shot like this that binds all the characters and their actions together really helps the audience understand what's happening, so they remain involved in the scene. We blocked the shot and rehearsed for about an hour or two, and got it in 7 takes. Once we pulled off the 360 shot, the entire crew gave themselves and each other a big round of applause, and it was well deserved. It's such a great cast and crew regardless, but for that particular shot it was like everyone, from the stuntmen and extras to the crane operators to assistant directors, understood what we were trying to achieve and were absolutely at the top of their game that evening. That nobody got hit by the camera, which was assuming Pastor has an incredible speed, was a miracle in itself. But everyone had their timing and moves down to perfection, and that's why it only took 7 takes. That was a great moment." End quote. Marshall explained how they filmed the scythe at the end of the battle. Quote, "The scythe was very similar to the mammoth in that it was 100% CGI. I showed all the live-action elements, the men releasing the scythe mechanism, the wildlings on the wall about to be struck by it, but all the actual scythe shots were created in the computer, and beautifully realized they were too." Unquote. Of Egret's death scene, Marshall said, quote, "I had to overcome the issue of these 2 actors having such a painful, intimate scene within the context of a battle. Excuse me. I achieved this by using slow motion, one of the very few times it's been used in Game of Thrones, one of the other times being the following my previous episode, Blackwater, in order to visually and orally force the battle into the background, leaving them almost trapped in this moment, allowing it to play out in a more poignant manner and pack a much more powerful dramatic punch." As she's dying in his arms, Egret tells Jon Snow that she wishes they could have stayed in that cave, where they made love, back in Season 3, Episode 5, Kissed by Fire. At the time, Egret and Jon were bathing together in hot spring, and she said she wished they could stay there forever and hold on to that moment, instead of having to go back outside to a world filled with wars and the conflict between the Night's Watch and wildlings. As the writers note in the Inside the Episode featurette, Egret says in Jon's arms was one of the few times that the TV series has used slow motion. They tried to use it sparingly because it could be cheesy if overused, but they felt that this was one of the right moments for it. As he explained, the slow motion allows the camera to show Jon's subjective point of view. The battle's raging all around him, but all that has faded away from his attention, and time slows to a crawl as his beloved Egret dies. The sounds of the battle are also muted to show that all of Jon's focus is on Egret. To aid this effect, actress Arissa Wesley had came to ADR to re-record all of her lines. The way the audio technicians had entirely clean recording, without any other sounds from the battle, every little breath, whimper, and effort Egret makes after she is shot can be heard. Normally, the camera could barely register these sounds. The scene has switched to Jon's personal perspective and he is holding Egret, so he does hear this. At the San Diego Comic-Con 2014 panel, Rose said that Egret's death scene was also the last scene she filmed for the TV series, and that she was thankful for this, because the scene was so emotionally draining that it would have been difficult to subsequently come back and film scenes from earlier episodes in the season. In the Inside the Episode guide video, writers Benioff and Weiss acknowledged that in the novels, Piper and Grin actually don't die in the Battle of Castle Black. Piper's death has no counterpart in the books. Grin's heroic sacrifice of stopping the giant from breaching the tunnel gate was performed by Donal Noye in the books, a winter blacksmith who once served the Baratheons. Many other minor Night's Watch characters also die during the battle in the books. Benioff and Weiss explained that they wanted to show the real cost of the battle and for it to have a dramatic impact, which meant they had to kill a few named recurring characters. Due to the time constraints of adaptation, the TV series has only been able to focus on and develop a limited number of watch members, never even introducing Donal Noye, while Pip and Grin are characters that the audience has grown attached to. In the books, John warned Molestown about the advancing wildling raiding parties south of the Wall, so most inhabitants fled to Castle Black before they arrived. The Night's Watch was so badly outnumbered that they let any of the refugees who were strong enough to fire a bow or crossbow join in the defense, including several of the whores from the brothel. A prostitute named Zay turned out to be a good shot with a crossbow. In the TV series, Molestown was taken by surprise and most of its inhabitants were killed, with Gilly as the only survivor who manages to reach Castle Black. Though in the books, Gilly never went to Molestown but stayed at Castle Black. Molestown is located only half a league south of Castle Black, so it's entirely possible that Gilly could reach the wall by simply walking for several hours in a single night. When Selma kisses Gilly, Hannah Moore deliberately decided not to passionately kiss John Bradley back, but for reaction to be a mixture of surprise and confusion. Mary's reasoning was that in all probability, Creston never kissed any of his wives, neither his daughter-wife Gilly nor any of the older wives, including her mother. Craster also jealously guarded his wives, and they had no contact with the world outside of Craster's keep, not even with other wildlings. Logically, Mary concluded, Gilly's never been kissed before, nor even seen other people kissing romantically before she fled Craster's keep. Maester Aemon revealed to Jon Snow in season 1 episode 9 Baelor that he was actually born Aemon Targaryen, and is a long-forgotten uncle of the Mad King. He was the son of King Maegor Targaryen and grew up as a prince in the royal court. This episode reveals that he also told Samwell at some point off-screen. Given that Samwell is one of the few well-educated members of the garrison at Castle Black, he was appointed as Aemon's steward for sending and receiving messages in the Ravenry. So given how closely he works with Aemon, it is entirely plausible that he explained to him at some point. In the books, Samwell is aware at this point that Aemon is a Targaryen, though it wasn't made clear if Jon or Aemon himself told Sam. Aemon reiterates to Samwell the warning he gave to Jon and Baelor, that the greatest threat to duty is love, and he should remember that he has taken a vow to the Night's Watch. Maester Aemon's story about his past is an invention of the TV series. He said as a young man, many girls threw themselves at him because he was a royal prince, and that one even succeeded, and so remembers his lost love very clearly. This led to some fan speculation that this girl was actually Olenna Tyrell, particularly because Olenna remarked to Margaery back in season 4 episode 4 Oathkeeper that she once had been engaged to a Targaryen, but didn't like him and seduced Luthor Tyrell to get out of it. Olenna does mention in the books that she was engaged to marry Targaryen in youth, but did everything she could to avoid the match. In both versions, she doesn't say what his name was, though the anecdote about sexually seducing Luthor is an added detail for the TV show. The possibility that the girl was Olenna, however, would contain several contradictions. First, Olenna said she didn't like the Targaryen she was betrothed to and actively evaded their union. William says the girl in his past threw herself at him. Second, Maester Aemon is about 30 years older than Olenna. While there is always some chance that the TV series would drastically change the chronology, the age shift is quite drastic. In the books, Aemon began training at the Citadel when he was around 9 years old, became a full maester when he was 19, and then joined the Night's Watch when he was around 35 years old in 233 AC, roughly around the same time that Olenna Redwyne was born. The TV series anecdote also ignores the fact that Aemon was in training as a maester since he was 9, and thus would have been ineligible for marriage at a young age. There are numerous examples in history of maesters being seduced. Also, Aemon could have been released from his vows and challenged his younger brother to become king himself, but in the end he chose not to. So it's possible that they went through themselves at the young Aegon, even knowing he was a maester, perhaps hoping he would one day be released from his vows. The World of Ice and Fire source book revealed that Olenna was actually engaged to marry Aemon's nephew, where the TV series removed the entire generation of House Targaryen to make Aerys II the Mad King, the direct son of Aemon's younger brother Aegon V. So it is a real girl who Olenna was engaged to in the TV continuity. Jon Snow gave the edge Jon Styr during the last moment of their fight by spitting blood in his face, giving Jon the moment he needed to grab a hammer and bring it down into Styr's skull. This is roughly the same trick that Karl Tanner used against Jon in Craster's Keep in First of His Name, nearly killing him. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly, where Spainhoff Weiss gave some details about the new sets built to show more of the top of the wall in this episode. Benioff, quote, "In terms of the sets, our new production designer Deborah Riley did this magnificent top-of-the-wall set, far bigger than what we had before. So you could do walks and talks, you could have massive action sequences. It's completely surrounded by green screen, which is apparently the biggest green screen in Europe," end quote. Weiss, quote, "Neil and Deb spent a lot of time watching the Kubrick film Past the Glory to get a sense of how to apply trench warfare set building to an icy top-of-the-wall environment. She did a really fantastic job, and has to be the biggest styrofoam piece in existence," end quote. At the end of the episode, Jon and Sam will find the aftermath of the fight between the giant Mag the Mighty and the Six Black Brothers led by Grenn, which neither Grenn and his men nor the giant survived. Curiously, the bars of the gate are bent outwards, despite the fact that when last seen, the giant was charging to try to bash the gate inwards. This might be a mistake, but then again, the camera cuts away before we see how Mag ultimately managed to force his way through the gate, so it is possible that he eventually tried to pry it apart. The Seasifer blooper reel revealed that during the fight between Styr and Jon Snow, in one take, Styr misses Jon and embeds his axe into a wooden weapons rack. The axe got stuck on the wood anyway, and through Yuri Kolnikov, sorry I butchered that, struggles for a few moments to get it off. Another blooper reel revealed that when Owen Teal was fighting in the courtyard, he struck his prop sword against the Stelmate's shield so that the blade of the prop sword snapped off completely at the hilt. When Then where Exile lands on top of the wall to spy on the defenses, the actor owl refused to land on its mark. After full 2 hours of attempts, Neil Marshall was on the verge of giving up and resorting to using a CGI owl for the shot, but then the actor owl finally got the mark correctly. When one of the giants chases after the mammoth and is shot in the back by a ballista bolt, the way he falls down when he dies is an homage to the famous scene in the 1971 film The French Connection, when Gene Hackman's character shoots the hitman Nicoli. When flaming oil barrels are dropped on the team of wildlings handling the mammoth, neither the wildlings nor the flames are digitally added. Instead, some were actually set on fire, protected by their heavy layers of clothing and their exposed skin covered in gel. They were really on fire for a few seconds. Then the moment that the director called cut, crew members scrambled to put out the flames of fire extinguishers before the stomach could be seriously hurt. Even the flaming wildling who gets caught up in the ropes and gets dragged on the ground by the panicking mammoth was a practical effect. The stomach was pulled on the ground by a rope attached to a truck. They made sure that the rope was positioned high on the truck to match the height of where the rope would be attached to the mammoth's shoulders. To portray the giant Meg the Mighty charging through the ice tunnel, the production team built a smaller half-scale replica of the tunnel. Therefore, when the 7-foot-tall stunt actor charged through the 8-foot half-scale tunnel, the perspective made him look like he was a 14-foot-high giant charging through a 16-foot-high tunnel. The shot of the giant on his side of the tunnel and Grant's men on the other side of the gate were then matched up digitally. So overall, I think this is a pretty darn good episode, and yeah, R.I.P. Ygritte, but yeah. So overall, I give The Watchers on the Wall 5 Iron Thrones out of 5. Well, anyway, tune in more as we take a look at the finale of Series 4, The Children. So, until then, remember everyone, winter is coming.